we'll wait for you, or I'll send everybody back out. All right, go ahead. Please, the court counsel. This time the state calls Dr. Alice F. Gooding. Dr. Gooding, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear affirm the evidence you're about to present in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat. Thank you for being here today. Dr. Gooding, state your full name for the record, if you would.
It's Alice F. Gooding, Gooding.
Dr. Gooding, what is your title, and what do you do every day when you're not in court?
I'm an associate professor of anthropology at Kennesaw State University and the forensic anthropologist for the state of Georgia at large.
And how long do you teach classes every day? Is that something you carry a full caseload, or how do you do?
Being a professor is my full-time job, except for classes canceled today.
Now, sometimes you do forensic skeletal recovery and analysis. Is that right?
That's correct.
How did you get into that? What got you to do that? Was it an interest you had in a young age, or did you pick it up later in life, or what got you into this type of work?
I wanted to be a medical doctor, but I didn't want my patients to talk back to me.
Fair enough. If you don't mind, just tell the jury your educational background through whatever degrees you have now.
I got my bachelor's in anthropology at Occidental College in Los Angeles, my master's in archaeological resource management from the University of Georgia, and my PhD in biological anthropology from the University of Tennessee, and I'm a board-certified forensic anthropologist, number 160.
And what is your doctorate degree in?
Biological anthropology.
And how many years total were you actually in a classroom or school setting?
After high school?
Yeah, so 4 years undergraduate, and how many years after that?
Some quick math would be probably close to 10.
And how many people actually do what you do for a living, what you're testifying to today?
For reference, I am the only forensic anthropologist in the state of Georgia, so very few.
And how long have you been doing that here in the state of Georgia?
This is my 10th year.
Do you travel anywhere else for your job when you're an expert?
I have traveled, but only when the jurisdiction is in Georgia and the case is tried somewhere else.
Typically, just in a nutshell, what kind of things do you do in your line of work?
On the forensic anthropology side?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
My responsibilities are to sometimes recover remains at a scene. In a lab setting, they are to analyze the remains, inventory them, and analyze the presentation in front of me. To do your work outside just having the formal education, is there anything else that you do to have the skills and knowledge in order to be a forensic anthropologist? I attend continuing education courses, yearly scientific conferences, do scientific work that's published in journals, and present at scientific conferences.
And what is a forensic anthropologist?
A forensic anthropologist uses skeletal biology to learn who someone was based on their skeleton and what happened to them.
And how do you go about gaining the knowledge and what you do trying to identify the skeletal remains? Is that a lot of, did you have not just book knowledge, but hands-on practical experience and training with that?
That's correct.
So tell the jury about that, how you learn to do your job.
A lot of my classes and training are hands-on in nature with case analyses, peer-reviewed reports, things where you get feedback on the physical work that you're doing.
I know you said there's not many people that do your job, but is there a branch of the science that you do that's related to what you do, but not necessarily your expertise, but is kind of in the same area?
Biological anthropology is the larger subfield under which forensic anthropology falls.
And do you know how many people total in the United States do something similar to what you do?
Probably a couple of thousand.
Do y'all have conferences or any professional organizations that you're a member of?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. What type of things would those be?
I'm a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the American Board of Forensic Anthropology, the American Association of Biological Anthropologists, the Georgia Academy of Science. I think that's it.
Have you ever been called upon, whether it's in some type of legal case or criminal setting or a trial setting, to give opinions, expert opinions in forensic anthropology?
Yes.
How many times have you been deemed an expert in our course, do you know?
5.
Just this time I tender in Dr. Goon is an expert in forensic anthropology.
No objection as to that.
All right. She's deemed to be an expert. As I've told y'all, she can testify to things that are, give her opinion as to things in her area of expertise. All right, go ahead.
Okay, we've got the foundation now, so let's talk about really, when it comes to forensics anthropology, when I say forensics, what does that mean to you?
Forensics is a large field of different scientific subdisciplines like blood analysis, fingerprint analysis. My specialty is just the bones.
And when you combine that with anthropology, how does that in a practical sense come out in your everyday life? Do you work with law enforcement? Do you work with other agencies when trying to figure out what when the remains are found, what they are?
I work on a contract basis, which means when the Georgia Bureau of Investigation has a case that is primarily bones, the medical examiner will review it and then reach out to me to do an anthropological analysis.
Now, as a PhD doctor, you don't have a badge, you carry around a gun or anything like that, do you?
I do not.
Are you separate and independent of law enforcement?
That's correct.
If you go to a scene and you're working with law enforcement, do you have your own protocols and procedures that you follow to be objective regardless of what they do?
That's correct.
Would you have any problem whatsoever with telling law enforcement, stay out of my lane, or disagree with them when it comes to your science and what you do?
I do not.
But do you work well with law enforcement?
Absolutely.
Are you involved at all with training law enforcement or giving continuing legal education classes with law enforcement agencies and state workers in this area?
I do.
Do you work with crime scene investigators at times or teach them?
I do.
What type of teaching or things do you do with people like that? Is there anything that you do every year, or is it kind of just on when they need something, they ask you to teach it?
Every year at Kennesaw State University, we offer a training series for law enforcement, coroners, medical examiners, crime scene technicians, anybody in the medical legal field. We teach them to recover bodies from clandestine scenes, which is anywhere that you would not expect a body to be. And we cover the training from classroom all the way out into the field. So we have a field-based learning experience for them.
I would imagine, is it not at times that your objective when you're brought in as a scientist may be different from what law enforcement is trying to achieve at a scene? In the sense that scientifically, when you're not interested in per se catching a suspect or someone that did this. When you're called to this scene, is it kind of a very particular task they're asking you to do, or a very small part of their case?
That's correct. I have no, it's outside the scope of my science to be interested in perpetrators.
So you're not involved in the interviews with people or trying to identify suspects or chase people down or apprehend anybody. You're just really based on the location, the loci, what is there in the remains usually in a case?
That's correct.
Now, did you know the officers in this case that they took, I believe, a class of yours, and that's how they remembered to call you?
Yes.
And I want to talk about case specifics in this case. Do you remember when you were called and what date that was?
It was July 5th, 2018.
Do you remember who called you or how you were called into the case?
Sergeant Shaw of, I believe it's Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, probably placed a call or a text to me to request my assistance on a case.
How often during the year are you being called out on things?
Less so than I used to be. It used to be a couple of times a year, but I've out-trained myself a little bit. They don't need my help as much.
Do you, when you do this type of work, if you can just tell the jury, if you were called out, let's say you were just called out to any scene, what things do you take with you? First of all, how do you get there? Do you have your own vehicle? Do you have tools and things that you take to the scene? What's that like?
I have a personal vehicle, and I have a large trunk full of equipment and supplies that I bring myself.
Do you ever take anybody with you when you're doing scenes?
Sometimes I do.
I think in this case you had some interns or some people that were working with you, if you remember.
I don't remember if I I don't recall that I did, but I may have.
I want to look at a couple of dates in this case. I've got, and do you have a copy of your report?
I do.
Which one? Judge, this time I'm going to tune into evidence Gooding 1 through Gooding 120, 120 exhibits.
All right. Any objections?
No objection.
All right, they're admitted.
I think you've got yours. I'm going to have these two. So they'll come up on the computer screen. All right, let's look to go through the case. I think, July 5th of 2018, I believe you arrived at the scene at 2155 Purcell Lane in Cherokee County, Georgia, about 6:30 p.m. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then the other 2 days I want to go through, I think you did the inventory and analyzed Gary Farris's remains, and we stipulated that it is Gary Farris's remains, so I just want you to know that.
Thank you.
July 17th and July 23rd, 2018. Is that right?
That's correct.
So July 5th and then July 17th and July 23rd of 2018. When you go to a scene, I think you have certain methods that you follow in what you do. Is that right?
That's correct.
I want to ask you about, is it typical when you go to a scene, I think your report talks about there's a rake, screen, surface survey, and then a grid, and then you map and record, and then you do a recovery. Is that kind of the procedure that you do?
That's correct.
Well, what is raking? Is that the first step, or is there a step before that?
There is usually a just gross observation, meaning looking around. I would count that maybe as the first step. But then secondary to that, yes, would be raking up material in the surrounding area.
What is raking? What does that entail?
Can be using tools, including actual rakes like you would use for leaves, or hand raking, in which you use your hands to kind of scrape material together.
And that's just trying to find any remains or any evidence or items of interest?
Usually around the perimeter of what you have observed as the main site.
And here in this case, at the location, you're looking at a fire pit, is that right?
That's correct.
And then after raking, you do a screening. What does that consist of?
Screening is when you use your eyes to visually screen the material that you've collected to see if there's anything of interest.
And after screening, I think you can do something called a surface survey.
That's correct.
And what is that?
That, again, using visual methods to look over the area and indicate, in this instance, using pin flags, which are small flags you may have seen near electrical lines or sewer lines, using those to flag or indicate areas of interest.
Once you figure out the location and the interested location, once you get it kind of surveyed, then you at some point do a grid, is that right?
That's correct.
Tell the jury what a grid is, and in this case, I know it's going to be A, B, C, D, but what do you do there?
A grid is a cordoned off area that you've identified as of interest. So you put up stakes in some sort of rectangle or square shape, whatever is fitting for that situation. String up some twine to indicate that that area should be kept away from in terms of walking through or anything like that. And then I use a quadrant system where I divide the grid into 4 quadrants so I can keep track of what material comes from what area of the larger grid.
And then after you form that grid, I think there's procedures and there's a mapping and recording that takes place?
That's correct.
What does that consist of?
When remains are identified or other things of interest, items of interest, they are mapped, so they're measured from an X and Y. If you remember from maybe elementary school, an X and a Y on a graph, we can actually measure from each of those lines and come up with a coordinate or a point of the location of that material.
And Doctor, are you very systematic in this process? Is it a slow and deliberate process at times?
It is.
And does it take quite some time?
It does.
Do you remember how long you were at the scene?
Approximately 6 hours.
And then finally, I think you get to the recovery of remains. Is that right?
That's correct.
And what does that process look like?
The recovery of the remains is usually done by only a select few people to limit the amount of traffic through that cordoned off area. The human remains in this case would have been removed and set aside, and then the debris from underneath them removed and screened until no more human remains were recovered.
Is it kind of like peeling an onion? You just go down and down and down and down, or scraping different surfaces until you find no more remains?
Yes, that's correct.
And after you go through the physical ground and layering, if you would, then you do an inventory and a session or an analysis, is that right?
In the laboratory setting, yes.
So July 5th, you do all the steps up to the recovery, and then after that, from July 17th and July 23rd, that's when you do the inventory and analysis. Is that
That's
fair
correct.
to say? All right, let's walk through the photographs. And I probably will move pretty fast because I think a lot of these are going to be in already. This is Gooding 1. Tell the jury what this is and what significant it is in your case.
This is a map of the grid and the 4 quadrants, the A, B, C, and D, over the fire pit with the human remains indicated by those boxes that have the names of the bones in them.
So we have quadrant A, right top, quadrant B, bottom right, quadrant C, bottom left, and quadrant D, top left. Is that right?
That's correct.
Is it called the datum or datum?
Either's fine.
Just tell me how you call it.
I call it a datum, but that's because
Let's
I'm
go with datum then.
from around here.
My accent may call it something different. What is the datum?
A datum is the highest point of elevation. So in this map, it's listed as 0 inches. And then anything measured below that will be a negative number. So it gives you a sense of the depth, where the X and Y measurements gives you a sense of the location.
And directionally, north, south, east, west, would it be north be top? Is that what we're...
The north arrow on the left side of the screen is pointing top.
So
a little
this
bit of an
direction a
angle.
little bit.
That's correct.
All right. For the most part, though, north is up here, and then kind of as you look at it. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. Gooding 2, what is this here?
This is the fire pit scene, specifically quadrants A and B. A is on the top portion, and B is the portion of the picture that's closest to you.
And Dr. Good, I'm going to go kind of fast through the photographs, but if you see anything that you want to talk about, just stop me and point it out, and we'll do that, okay?
Okay.
3, just another angle of this. 4, close up. 5. And 6, as we go through, these are just some of the things that you collected from the quadrants, is that right?
That's correct.
And at some point, I think it was described as an eraser, but the bullet in the ribs, tell us about that.
Yes, you can see it on the prior photo, number 6, and then the other side of that mass, the kind of orange colored, does look a bit like the end of a number 2 pencil eraser, but that is a projectile.
When you first arrived at the scene, did law enforcement, did you know what you were dealing with at that time? I don't know if the bullet was found at the time you arrived or anything talking about that, or was it while y'all were actually processing the remains?
That's my hand and my photograph.
This is 9, 10. And I took this from your report, Gooding 11. What is this?
This is a diagram, a schematic of the front and the back of a human, and it shows the area from which the bullet was found in the remains in this case.
And it was, looking at this diagram, I think you talk about anterior to posterior. What does that mean?
Anterior is the front of your body, and the posterior is the back side of your body.
And you found the bullet to be going from anterior to posterior, is that correct?
That's correct.
Gooding 12, just some of this would be at the GBI, so not on the 5th, but on the days that you analyzed it, is that right?
That's correct.
Do you remember about approximately how much in weight the remains there were?
I don't remember if they were weighed. And if they were, that would have been the medical examiner.
Were there different varying degrees of damage or heat and fire damage upon the bones?
There were.
Tell us about that if you could.
When a fire burns unevenly, which is common to most outdoor fires as opposed to a commercial crematory oven, the fire will burn the body in an uneven manner. Human bodies are also uneven in the way that they're built in terms of where the fat and the muscle and the bones are. So in some areas that have very little fat and muscle and tissue, the high heat may burn right through to the bone. In other areas where there is a lot of muscle tissue, you may see that it's black and charred, but there might be some soft tissue remaining underneath.
When it came to this fire, did you find that the fire itself was I guess a significant fire in the sense that it has not just one that just went up for an hour or so and then went out? Was it more significant of
I'll
a
object to that. That's outside her expertise. About the fire in particular itself.
Judge, I think she's a forensic anthropologist. She can give her opinion about fire and the remains.
We also got another expert who's coming in to testify about the fire, so I think it's that expert.
Ask her to what extent she knows, and then we'll go from there.
To what extent do you know about the size of the fire, the magnitude of the fire?
The only, within the scope of my knowledge, the only thing I can say about the fire is the temperature, which was taken at the site, and the consistency and presentation of these remains are consistent with a fire of about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit,
Okay.
which is listed in the report.
All right, in your report, there was an actual measuring temperature of the center of the pit, is that right?
Yes,
And what was the degree in Fahrenheit that you found this to be?
230 degrees.
And
And
you
that
all-
was, sorry, that was by fire personnel, not myself.
Right, but that was the measurement, 230 degrees Fahrenheit?
That's correct.
And would that have been taken prior to your arrival or sometime when you arrived?
It was noted that it was there, taken when I was there.
Okay. And then dealing with, I'm going to come back to this, but based on the objection, when it comes to thermal damage, you opined about the charring and black discoloration was observed throughout the present skeletal remains. Is that right?
That's correct.
And based on that, what was your conclusion?
That the remains had been burned.
And he said that these characteristics are consistent with the fire reaching what level in Fahrenheit again?
About 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
As you pulled the physical remains from the fire, did you notice that it appeared to be burning more so in one location of the grid as opposed to other locations?
The majority of the remains and the burning was taking place in quadrants A and B.
So top right, then bottom right. Is that correct?
On one of those prior pictures, correct.
When you're piecing together the remains, and I'm sure as an expert you quickly can realize certain pieces of bones or certain things, but how long does it, in the condition that you found these remains, how difficult was it to analyze and figure out what exactly the bones that you could determine to be?
Would have taken a couple of hours.
And how do you do that? Is it visually or do you do microscopes or how do you?
It's a visual observation.
Is there any reason that there will be some bones that are more intact than others that you found in this case?
Again, that has to do with the amount of muscle and fat and skin that's over the remains. It's harder for the heat to get to them. For some areas that have less tissue or the fire isn't as hot in that area, you may see some more fragmentation.
And we see here that when you go through and take pictures, you're putting like bones to like parts. Is that how you organize them?
That's correct.
And here we're looking at Gooding 53. What is this a picture of?
This is a picture of the block of burned tissue and a portion of the ribs and the projectile found within them.
And then 64, is that just the projectile from the ribs?
That's correct.
And when you were able to gather remains of head bones and things like that, did you try to piece it back together to see if there was any injuries or anything you could locate?
Yes, I tried to reconstruct the bones of the cranium or the head as much as possible.
And here, Gooding 96, is that what we're seeing?
That's correct. This is the left side of the top portion of the cranium.
And why do you try to reconstruct the cranium?
The objective is to see if there's any other sort of trauma to the cranium that the fire may have obscured.
Typically, do you find in cases like this that there are certain bones that remain? Assuming there wasn't a disruption to the bones, like something had broke the bones or something like that. But in a fire like this, is there a reason that you would find more of the bigger bones as opposed to other bones?
A lot of the bigger bones are encased in more muscle and fat and tissue.
And you did find some soft tissue remains?
That's correct.
And you wrote a report, in this case, is that right, that we provide to the defense?
That's correct.
And did you share your findings that you had in this case with the GBI and Dr. Atkinson, the medical examiner?
I did.
What I'd like to do is some questions about your report. When you were looking at the, when you're looking at the remains, did you find that there were other material in the burn pile besides just human remains? For example, burned trash, household debris, things like that?
That's correct.
Was there evidence that there was also wood or other material there in the pile?
Yes.
And were you able to sift those out and separate them?
They were separated from the human remains.
And the state of preservation for the materials that you found in this, what did they range from? In the sense of the charring or the powder substance? What level did you find that they consisted of in the burn pit itself?
In the pit, you saw different colors, white, ash, blues, grays, black charring, so all different types of burning.
Out of all the remains that you were able to recover on scene, how did y'all transport those to the GBI to be analyzed?
That's a question for the coroner.
Did you get those, were they packaged in a certain manner?
deep to the ribs, which means closer to the gut side as opposed to the skin side.
As we see in Figure 11 here on page 16 of your report, Exhibit 120, is that how, when you were processing the burn pit, is that exactly how it looked in the way it was sitting in the pile when it was actually taken from there?
That's correct.
And then at some point you then took that and it was, you were able to analyze that and then submit it to the GBI as evidence in this case?
That's correct.
Just have one moment. Did you only find the remains of one person?
That's correct.
Did you find any other bullets or things like that in the burn pile?
I did not.
Did you find any parts to a gun or anything like that?
I did not.
Did you find any metal outside of that, though? Just other things in the pile that did not burn that was metal?
I believe so.
Did you find any ropes or toe straps or anything else in the fire?
Not to my knowledge.
I have nothing else, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Dr. Goody. My name is Michael Ray. We met outside previously, right?
That's correct.
And have a good bit of questions for you, but not too terribly many. First off, I want to know, how do you become the state forensic anthropologist? Like, who gives you that job?
The chief medical examiner at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Okay. So are you actually, because being a college professor, I think you said you're an associate professor?
That's correct.
That's where I graduated from. So that makes you're a state employee, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Now, are you serving, do you have basically just two state functions? One associate professor, two the state forensic anthropologist?
Correct.
All right. In this case, because I know you're testifying as an expert, a lot of times experts are paid. Are you
That's correct.
compensated by the state additionally above your state salary for testifying today?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you compensated by the sheriff's office for coming out, ruining, your after the 4th and coming out and dealing with this case? Did they have to compensate you as well?
No, they did not.
They did not?
Not to my knowledge.
Just your testimony here today?
No, the analysis of the remains.
Okay, so let's back up. Let me ask better questions. How about that? So, I'm assuming as the forensic anthropologist for the state, you get some type of small salary or some type of salary.
It's not a salary, it's a contract basis, so it's just an invoice per case.
Okay, invoice per case. All right, so basically, is it like an hourly rate?
It's based on the type of request. In this case, it was a trauma analysis, so there would have been a fee for trauma analysis.
Okay, so what would you classify what you did here? Because you did a lot more here, getting the bones out of the burn pile, doing the trauma analysis, and all that. So what would you classify what you did here?
A recovery and an analysis.
Okay, what were you paid for the recovery and the analysis, if you recall?
I believe at that time, I think $100 for the analysis and maybe $250 or $280 for the recovery.
Okay, that's in total.
Well, that would be maybe $380 in total.
Okay, that's what I meant. That's
Yes.
not like your hourly rate. That's the total what you
Yes,
received.
yes.
Okay. On top of that, your state salary with being an associate professor.
Correct.
I'm gonna slide over. There's a sticker here that says "Don't stand here." So, okay. All right. So first off, just so there's no confusion, because we had Dr. Atkinson testifying yesterday. You're not a forensic pathologist, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And the difference, partly in that, is a forensic pathologist is a medical doctor.
That's correct.
You are not a medical doctor.
Correct.
You are not able to certify cause or manner of death.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, Trying to figure out a good place. Well, we'll just start with your report. In your report that Mr. Fogus was going over with you, you had stated perimortem trauma.
That's correct.
Right, perimortem trauma being before or just after death.
Perimortem trauma is at or around the time of death.
Okay, at or around. Are you familiar with hemorrhaging?
Yes.
Okay, because I asked Dr. Atkinson yesterday if he could prove to a medical certainty whether or not Gary was alive or dead when he was shot, and he said he could not. So my question to you is, how can you use the term perimortem trauma just before or just after death when you can't prove to a medical certainty he was even alive?
That's why it's at or around the time of death, so that could be a pretty wide scale.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say around the time of death. Somebody's been laying there 2 or 3 days, right? You couldn't tell the difference from your examination, right? In a situation like this where the body's been burned.
In this situation, I would still classify that as perimortem trauma.
Okay.
Because the projectile was on the gut side of the bones.
Okay. So if it was on the gut side of the bones, what internal organs did the bullet impact?
That I cannot testify to.
Okay. So you can actually say that it went into the body cavity.
That's incorrect.
That's incorrect?
I can say that it went into the body cavity.
Okay. Then, yet again, what did it hit?
That I cannot testify to.
Okay. But your testimony here is that your opinion that it's inside the body cavity.
That's correct.
Okay. And the bullet went in front to back.
That's correct.
Okay. So if I got shot right here, and actually let me show you number 11 and ask you this way. You actually don't know where that bullet is in 11, correct?
It's in that range of brackets.
Yeah, but I'm asking, I want to know specifically, where's that bullet? You don't know.
That's correct.
Okay. So, but it's your testimony, even though you don't know where it is, it's your opinion that it is on the gut side of the rib.
That's correct.
Okay. But yet again, you can't tell me anything that it hit.
That's correct.
Objection, asked and answered.
I'll move on, Judge. Now, generally, as an anthropologist, you would deal typically with bones, correct? And not soft tissue?
That's correct.
I hate not having it printed out. I'm sorry. You also stated in your report that you thought it was anterior to posterior. That would mean front to back, right?
That's correct.
I mean, so it's your opinion that if Gary was shot, that whoever shot him was standing in front of him, or a bullet had to come from his front, right?
I would agree with the second version of your statement.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about what you know about. Did you say my name? No. Now, as an anthropologist, do you typically see gunshot wounds in your cases?
Can you repeat the last word you said?
I said gunshot wound. As an anthropologist, like how often have you encountered gunshot wounds in your cases?
Oh, maybe 40 to 50% of the cases.
Okay. Well, how many cases have you worked? Because there's so few of y'all. So how many did you work this year?
I don't know. I know the total is over 160.
Since when? I mean,
2014.
okay, so in 10 years you've done 160, so that's 6 a year?
I think our math is adding up.
Okay, so, and then you said about half of those have gunshots? So
Yes.
you're seeing 3 a year?
Sure.
Okay. And are those bullets, are they in bone or you're finding them around skeletal remains?
Both. I've seen both.
Okay. Now you would agree, based on your job, because you talk to the medical examiner a lot, right?
I do not.
Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and jump in. Do you know that Dr. Atkinson copy and pasted your version of gathering the remains into his autopsy report?
Yes.
Verbatim.
Yes.
Okay. You would also agree with me that Dr. Atkinson never went to Purcell Lane.
I don't know that.
Okay. Did you see him there?
No, not while I was
Okay.
there.
Did you see him taking any of the photographs?
Not while I was there.
Okay. We'll come back to that in just a minute. All right. So, what type, as an anthropologist, expertise do you have in gunshot wounds?
To bone, quite a high level of expertise.
Okay. So, but you didn't see any of that here in this case. At least I can't find it in your report. Like any damage to bone from a bullet.
That's correct.
Okay. So we got no damage to bone from a bullet. You put the skull back together. There's no damage to that. Right.
That's
Except
correct.
for thermal damage.
That's correct.
And when I say there's no damage, universally there is thermal damage. Okay.
That's correct.
All right. So how about mapping trajectory of wounds? You got any skill and expertise in that?
When it relates to bone, yes.
Okay. And we already talked about that. Now, you don't have any entrance wound to examine, correct?
Not in bone.
Okay. Well, I mean, in this case, you didn't find any type of entrance wound. You just found a bullet lodged in soft tissue.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let me ask you too before I forget. Who, because I've asked everybody, who found the bullet?
To my recollection, it was me, but there were a good number of people peering over my work.
Okay. While you were working around this time that you find the bullet, who's there with you?
I can't give you a full inventory.
I'll name you some people, and you tell me if you remember they were there. That'd be easy. Was Sally Sims there?
She was on scene.
Okay. But you don't remember she was actually in the burn pile with you?
I can't recall who would have been in the pile. At times, it would have been only me.
Okay. Do you recall handing the rib and the bullet to Sally Sims?
Couldn't recall who I would have handed it directly off to.
How about Officer Shaw? Do you recall him helping you at the burn pile?
He was present at the scene.
But you don't recall him helping?
I don't recall in
Okay.
what.
That's fine. That's fine. What about Detective Westwood?
I don't recall.
Okay. And because I know Mr. Focus had asked you, but yeah, you had an intern with you there too.
Okay.
I don't remember their name either.
Apologies
It's not
to the
important.
intern.
I'm assuming they were a good intern. It's just been 6 years. Oh. Okay. I want to do a little comparison between your report and Dr. Atkinson's report, not verbatim comparison. So you had stated that, it's in your opinion, that the trajectory was front to back, and so are you aware that in the autopsy, Dr. Atkinson has said that he was unable to assess any type of bullet path?
I wasn't.
Did you know that?
After reading his report.
Okay, so you found that out. You did read his report. You read Atkinson's autopsy?
I have since this.
Prior to testifying here today, you went and read it?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah.
I wasn't provided with it.
And before he actually wrote his autopsy, you sent him a copy of your report?
I would assume so,
Okay.
given that it's copied and pasted.
Pasted into it, yeah. Do you always do that? Send a copy of your findings to the medical examiner?
I actually send them to the director of medical operations, and she distributes them to the medical examiner that requested.
Okay. What's the logic in that? Because shouldn't a medical, and I know you're not a medical examiner, but I'll ask anyway, shouldn't their opinion and analysis be separate and apart from what your findings are?
Objection relevant.
Oh, well.
No. I think we're a collaborative medical team employed with the same office.
Okay, well, that's fair.
I think it's reasonable to, if the medical examiner requests anthropological analysis, I think it's reasonable that they rely on those findings.
Okay. Now, let me. You know, when you try to organize everything so good, there it is. So in your report, I get ahead of myself when I just start talking, and then I got to scroll through and figure out where I am. So you stated like front to back, but the autopsy actually found here on. Let me get to it. Past it. You stated that it was front to back, right? That's what your report found.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, but in the autopsy, they found that couldn't assess for an entrance wound. So if you can't assess for an entrance wound, how can you say it's front to back?
Based on the location of the projectile in the remains.
Okay. But you are aware that also bullets do have the ability that if they hit some type of object, they do have the ability to tumble.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So got some contradiction there. The autopsy also says that they're unable to assess a direction of a wound path, correct?
Is that D?
Yeah, section D.
I'm reading that, yes.
Okay. Okay. And yet again, you found no other evidence of any other. Well, actually, you didn't find any other evidence or any damage to any other bone, correct? You found technically no evidence of any damage to bone, other than thermal damage.
That's correct.
Okay. So no other bone evidence of injury from a bullet.
That's correct.
Okay. Or any other blunt force object.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. You also you didn't offer any opinion in your report appropriately as to manner or cause of death.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, moving on to the more fun stuff. I want to talk. I really like your grid, by the way. And so this is Gooding 1. And I also want to pull up Gooding 3, just so I can get an idea here. Okay, can you see both those, Gooding 1 and Gooding 3? Oh, no, you didn't. Can you see both those, ma'am?
I can.
Okay. Okay, that looks fine. All right, so here's just a couple questions based on this, okay? You've got up here on number 1, this is quadrant A, correct?
That's correct.
So, and then you've got the cranium where the skull was found. It's kind of on the line between A and, well, the line between A and B.
That's correct.
Because it's right here. So, going over to Gooding 3, that puts it somewhere around, based on this, somewhere in this area here.
I would drop your cursor down and to the left a little bit.
You tell me when to stop.
Maybe over to the left just a little bit, right about there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. See? All right, so that's the skull. Also, what are the flags?
As I stated previously, the flags are part of the visual search when we identify areas of interest.
Okay, so it's like this flag may be like, hey, there may be something here, check it out.
That's correct.
Then I'm assuming when you've checked it out and removed whatever was there, if it was evidentiary, then you remove the flag? Like showing that that area had been searched?
Yes, but that wouldn't have been the order of operations.
Okay. All right, so we get so we got the skull around here, and then the next thing, if we go down a little bit, the pelvis is let's say in here. Is that a fair assessment based on your diagram?
Yes.
Okay, but then we've got, I'm assuming rib here, the very bottom. That's the rib with the bullet and the soft tissue.
I don't know that to be true.
Okay. Well, where was
I'd have to go back and look at the inventory. Looks like the rib with the bullet was found in Unit A, evidence bag 1.
Okay. But from your diagram you did here, we don't know where the bullet in that rib was found. We just know it's quadrant A.
We do know where it was found in the rib.
In the what? I couldn't
In
hear
the
you.
rib.
No. Okay, no, where at in the pile, in quadrant A. We don't have any documentation of that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so we know it's quadrant A here, or I'm assuming here because this is the burned area, but we don't know exactly where.
Correct.
Okay, so we got a rib down here. Let's see, femur and tibia. That's the front part of the leg and back part of the leg?
It's the top and the bottom part of the leg.
Oh, okay. Which one's which?
The femur is the thigh bone, and the tibia is the shin bone.
Gotcha. Okay. So those are the two leg bones. And then we also have another femur and the pelvis, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So any kind of issues as to why is there a lone rib bone down here at the very, very bottom? Any explanation on that?
My responsibility is mapping.
Oh, I'm not saying this is your fault. I'm just wondering if you know how it got there.
I wasn't concerned about that.
Okay, so I mean, because it would seem anatomically out of place, right? A rib below the pelvis.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
That's my whole point, right there. So nothing really to do with you. Okay. Already did that. That number. I'm just going to pull up your report because Mr. Fogel showed you something. I don't remember what it was. Okay, that's the part of the rib where you're saying it's on the gut side, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But yet again, going back to your anatomical drawing, you can't say where that bullet is in those ribs.
That's correct.
Okay. No further questions, Judge.
Hang on.
All right. You can sit down. Thank you, ma'am. You'll have a short witness or?